Welcome back to all the girlies, gays, and theys out there. I absolutely love the end of the year content, making them and watching them. So I decided, why don't I start my own series, which I'm calling Leave It in 2024. It is funny that I'm calling this a series when I can't make a part 2 of this video until 2025 is over. I got to thinking, after reading over 100 books this year and being a part of the book community for about 2 years, what are some of the things that I, as a reader and as a content creator, want to leave in 2024. I don't want to see it anymore out of books and out of Booktube. So I compiled a list here of some of my hot takes. And the first one on this list is very timely because I've been watching a lot of the best and worst books of 2024. And I'm seeing this trend happen a lot, and I've seen it happen in the past, which is 24 of the best books I read in 2024. Or even the opposite, the 24 of the worst books that I read in 2024. I really think as a book community, we should abandon this concept. I'm not so much talking about best and worst books that you read in that year because I love watching those videos. I'm more so discussing the number of books as it relates to the year that we are in, because at some point that number is going to get too high. Are some of y'all still going to be posting the 50 best books I read in 2050? I do think that it's more aptly to have the 10 best books I read or the top 10-15 books that I read. Like 10-15 seem like okay numbers, but like I said, at some point that number is going to get too high and we're just going to need to abandon that concept altogether. We just need to leave that in 2024. Now my next thing is romantasy books that don't balance the romance and the fantasy genres well at all. I'm particularly thinking of A Fate Inked in Blood and The Fourth Ring when I say this, because what some of you authors really want to do is to write a romance book, but you want to throw in a little bit of fantasy in there, but have the fantasy aspect of it be done so poorly. If you're going to write a romantasy book, those two genres need to be balanced so well. And I think two authors that I see do this really well is Grace Draven with Entreat Me and Lix Robertson with her Viking Omegaverse books. Those two authors do this very well, and they, in my mind, are the gold standard of how to balance those two genres very well. Now the next thing that we need to leave in 2024 is the he's abusing me, but I love him. I am speaking in particular of The Northwind by Alexandra Warwick, where the main male character treats the female character so poorly, but for some reason she wants to get in a romance with him, like make it make sense. This also goes for contemporary, traditionally published romances where the guy is so mean to her and so awful to her, but she still wants him. I mean, like, ladies, that is just a man. Throw him away. If he's being mean to you or awful to you, you do not need that in your life. Maybe just awful male main characters we need to leave in 2024 altogether. My next leave it in 2024 are barely legal aged girls in romance books. I'm talking about when the main female character is like 17, 18, 19, yet she's dating a 30, 40-year-old man. And my problem with this is that I'm mainly seeing this from female authors that are writing these barely legal girls into a romance. Like the authors that are writing these barely legal girls in their book, like that needs to be studied like mentally up here, because what does an 18-year-old have in common with a 35-year-old? One book that I have been particularly putting off reading for quite a while is the last book in the Chestnut Spring series. I think that one's Hopeless, where I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's Bo Eaton who gets into a relationship with the bartender, and like this girl is like 19, maybe 21, and this man is far older than her. And I just don't like these age gaps. I mean, same thing when it's reversed, when the guy is very young, but I don't see that often in romance book. It's always the girls that are just barely legal. I'm thinking about Penelope Douglas. I'm thinking about Haunting Adeline. And a lot of times when I'm reading these books is because they make the female main character so young because they want the girl to be like a virgin. Let's all remember that virginity is a social construct and that's not a real thing. So let's abandon these huge age gap romance and leave it in 2024. Now my next thing kind of relates to my other point is let's leave overly graphic sex scenes in 2024. Please. I don't want to hear about what's going into what orifice, what's going into what hole, what fluid is being spilled over what. Like, that's just like a lot for me. And I'm particularly thinking about fucking around because as I was reading that book, I had to take a break halfway through because of how overly graphic the scenes were being written as. Don't get me wrong, I love a little smutty book here and there, but I think there's certain level of spice that can be written well and tastefully. For example, Emily Henry does this really well. Deanna Rayburn does this really well with the Veronica Speedwell series. Elsie Silver in some of her earlier books does this really well. Grace Draven does this really well. And so does Lynx Robinson. I just feel like it can be done in a way that can still give you a ton of spice in what you want, but not be like crude about it. My next Leave It in 2024 is Insta-Lust polyamory books. I get it. You want to write a polyamory book. I enjoy myself a good polyamory book now again. Stolen by the Wolves, the Viking Omegaverse books, love them. Love that polyamory book. But what I'm finding a lot in polyamory book is that the guy and the girl see each other and they immediately want to jump into bed. And same for the other people that are entering within that polyamory romance. If you want to sell me the fantasy of a polyamory romance, like really build up why these characters are all attracted to each other and why they are okay with all hopping into bed with each other. I've already mentioned it before, but Lynx Robinson, the Viking Omegaverse series, does this very, very well. In the first book, Stolen by the Wolves, it is just Thrain and Tamsin. And then in the second book, we're introducing another guy. And then in the third book, we're expanding on the third guy that's entering into this polyamory romance. Give me the time, give me enough pages in order to me to like buy into the fantasy. I don't want to see y'all fucking on page 20. My next Leave It in 2024 is surprise pregnancy. Now this is a trope that I hate more than anything else. I do not like children in my books. In fact, if there is a child in the book that I'm reading, it's very unlikely that it is going to get a 5-star for me. And I know that's very particular to me. I especially don't like surprise pregnancy because I feel like it's being used as a trope or a plot device in order for the two main characters to stay together during their third act miscommunication. No surprise baby is gonna fix your relationship. It simply will not. The other thing I hate that kind of goes along with this is a baby log. Like if everything in the book is great, I'm loving it, but then at the very end you give us an epilogue where you show them having kids, I'm out, I'm done. There is a couple of surprise pregnancy in some Elsie Silver books, did not like it. And then there is a baby log in one of my like all-time favorite books, which is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. I still gave that book 5 stars because if I close my eyes and pretend it's not there, the baby log doesn't exist. So if you are an author and you are thinking of putting a surprise pregnancy or a baby log in your book, I need you to put the pen down, walk away, and just not do that. We just need to leave the surprise pregnancy in 2024. The other thing we need to leave in 2024 is the she fell first trope. When I am reading a romance book, I do not want the girly to be pining after the man whatsoever at all. I need that man to be simping for the woman from day one. She fell first should be a crime, quite frankly, because I don't want any women in my romance books to be fighting for the attention of a man. Because at the end of the day, that is just a man. That is just a plain ass man. Men should be groveling at our feet for us to even look at them. The next thing that we need to leave in 2024 is barely there world building. And I'm thinking specifically of The Fourth Wing. I'm so sorry, but I am a hater of The Fourth Wing from the very get-go. When this book was initially getting a lot of hype on TikTok and on BookTube, I was skeptical, but I was like, you know what, let's give it a chance. Let's see what the people are talking about. And I hated that book. Within a few chapters of starting that book, I just knew the world building was so flimsy and just hanging by a thread that a small gust of wind could blow it away. The world building in that book is nonsensical. How are you going to tell me that this world is lacking in dragon riders, but then your dragon college or academy are killing off potential dragon riders left and right? How does it make sense? Please explain it to me. An author that does world building particularly well is Mr. Brandon Sanderson. He does this so well that at some point I'm very confused as to what's going on in the book, but eventually I get over it and I get to a place where I understand what's happening with the magic system and everything. It takes a certain kind of brain and a writer to build a world that is done very well. And if you're thinking about writing a romance, I need you to sit down and really plot that through and think it out all the way before you give me a half-baked fantasy book. Along those lines, and this Leave It in 2024 is very particular to me, is I need authors to stop naming their main character Violet. Like, just don't do it, because no Violet that you write in your book is going to compare to my Violet. I mean, just look at her. This is another reason why I couldn't get into Fourth Wing, because Fourth Wing presented me a character named Violet who was so punk ass and so weak ass that I was just like, why are you named Violet? That name, Violet, remains only for the Violet in my heart. And if you name your main character Violet, like, you have an uphill battle to climb with me and my rating of your book, because your Violet is going to need to compare to this badass. My next Leave It in 2024 is The Husband Did It. When I pick up a mystery or a thriller and I find out that main character is married to a man, I automatically know who did it. Yes, the level in which I hate men has never been higher than this present moment, but the husband did it trope is so overused. When I'm reading a mystery or thriller, I want to go along with the ride. I want to speculate on who did it, who's the murderer, who's the killer, who's at fault here. And to be able to guess the husband did it from page 1 takes out that element of surprise for me. And I do think that authors are creative to the point where you don't need to always make it be the husband. Even though I do want to state in real life, it probably is the husband. The next Leave It in 2024 is one conversation or debate that I'm very much tired of having. I feel like this debate crops up every couple months or so in the book community, which is, does listening to audiobooks count as reading? And my answer to that is yes, it does. Yes, it does. There is no difference from physically reading than listening to an audiobook, because at the end of the day, we are getting the same story. We are digesting the same material. And if I hadn't told you that I had listened to that book on audio, you would never be the wiser. So this debate, does audiobook count as reading, really needs to be left in 2024, and we really don't need to be bringing it up again. Now, my last Leave It in 2024 is probably a controversial one, to be quite honest, but that would be the Goodreads choice words. Now, if you've been in the book community for a while and you have been following the Goodreads choice words, then you would know that sometimes when those nominees are announced and the voting is all done and said, you kind of question your head as to how did that book win? For example, The Ministry of Time. How did that book win sci-fi? Somebody please explain to me how. That book literally is not a sci-fi book. It just is simply is not. Also, I have not seen or heard a single person that follows Booktube say good things about that book. Like, it's confounding to me. I'm befuddled. How did that win? Because when I read that book, it was so boring. Not even the audiobook narrator, who is the same voice actor for Caitlin in Arcane, could get me to like that book. And also, sometimes when you look at the Goodreads choice awards and you look at the nominees, some of the nominees has like 3,000 reviews, whereas other nominees have like 100,000 reviews, and you're wondering, how did these two end up in the same category? How does this compare? How is this even a fair fight? But also, we know that people who haven't read all the books in that particular category are still voting. When I see a book has won the Goodreads Choice Awards, I take that with a massive grain of salt. I know that it's controversial to say to do away with the Goodreads Choice Awards, because so many videos span off of that on YouTube, whether it be like reading all the books in this category of Goodreads or reading all the Goodreads Choice Award winners. There are so many videos that span out of that. But if we're being completely honest, we know that the votes are rigged, and it just feels like a massive popularity contest without taking into account which are the actual good books, which are the not so great books. Those are all of my Leave It in 2024. I know that this was sometimes a little bit of a hot take coming from me, but if you have anything that you would particularly like to see to be left in 2024, please comment below. Also, please don't forget to subscribe, give it a like, and I will see you in another video. Bye!